The only war crime in this galaxy is losing. The Zinir High Tribunal sat in their towering crystalline chamber, their elongated forms bathed in the soft glow of their legal cesses. It had taken thousands of cycles, countless debates, and the meticulous input of the most esteemed species to craft the Galactic Accord on sentient conflict. Every rule was designed to maintain order among the advanced civilizations of the cosmos, preventing atrocities that could stain the dignity of war. No genocide, no biological warfare, no unnecessary suffering. And yet, as the assembled council finalized their latest deliberation, the enormous holoscreen in the chamber crackled with an urgent transmission. An Alor adjutant scuttled forward, its multi-jointed limbs quivering. "Esteemed Justicars, we have an issue." The screen flickered to reveal the devastated remains of Outpost K-47. The once proud alien stronghold was a charred husk. Its towering citadel collapsed into itself like a crushed insect. The planetary defense grid, once hailed as impenetrable, lay in smouldering ruin. And amidst the wreckage, pacing like a predator, was the lone surviving human warrior. A deep, disquieting silence filled the tribunal chamber. "The humans," the adjutant hesitated, "have retaliated." The Justicars exchanged glances, their eye stalks and mandibles shifting in silent concern. "This is impossible," one of them finally said. "Humanity signed the accords. They are bound by them." "Yes, they are," the adjutant said, "but we may have overlooked something." The screen zoomed in, the enhanced image revealing the human standing amidst the ruins. A warrior clad in battered combat armor, his hands streaked with blood, his rifle slung across his back. His eyes burned with a quiet intensity, an unrelenting focus that no alien could fully comprehend. "Designation: Captain Elias Ward," the adjutant read from the data slate. "Survivor of the Battle of Carthage Prime. Special Forces Operative. Lone human present at Outpost K-47. One of the Justicars interjected, their voice clipped with irritation. "We must classify this as an individual anomaly. Surely this is not indicative of the species at large." Another Justicar scrolled through a report, their bifurcated fingers trembling. "Correction. He was not the only human at Outpost K-47. The outpost was a civilian settlement primarily housing non-combatants." Silence. The adjutant continued. "All non-combatants were executed." The room grew cold. The Justicars were old, seasoned rulers, having long presided over the affairs of war with the detachment of beings who had outgrown primal emotion. But this was a miscalculation. "No retaliation force was dispatched," one Justicar asked, attempting to find a logical path forward. The adjutant hesitated again. "There was one." They gestured to the screen. The camera panned to a pile of alien corpses, dozens, then hundreds, stacked like discarded refuse. Zor soldiers, elite mercenaries, war drones, all reduced to twisted remnants. Some had been shot with clinical precision. Others had been reduced to nothing but charred husks. Captain Elias Ward was standing over the last survivor, an alien officer whose exoskeletal plating had been shattered, its breathing laboured. The alien's mandibles clicked weakly as it raised a trembling claw, pleading. The tribunal watched in horror as Ward spoke, his voice like distant thunder. "You killed them all." The alien gurgled something unintelligible. Ward knelt, gripping the alien's throat in one brutal motion. "My son was in that colony," Ward said, his voice measured. "My father, my brothers." The tribunal could do nothing as the screen flickered, the last thing recorded being the dull, wet sound of something breaking. Then the transmission cut out. The Justicars sat in stunned silence. One finally spoke. What laws has he broken?" The adjutant's voice was thin. "None. The Accord allows for personal vengeance in cases where all legal channels have been exhausted." "Legal channels? The nearest tribunal is 3 cycles away." The Justicar's faces darkened. One of them turned to the adjutant. "What forces do we have nearby?" The adjutant did not respond immediately. Instead, he pulled up a tactical display. The planet of Outpost K-47 was surrounded. Zor warships, entire fleets, combat-ready and awaiting orders. The Justicars relaxed slightly. "Send in the fleets," one ordered. "One human cannot—" The screen shifted. A dozen more Zinner warships, each one broadcasting an emergency distress signal. Explosions flickered across their hulls, their defensive systems rendered useless. Then the feed switched again. This time it wasn't just Ward. It was an entire human strike force. The Zinner forces they had expected diplomacy. They had expected legal proceedings. They had expected restraint. They had not expected this. Hundreds of drop pods rained from orbit like burning stars. Entire platoons of human soldiers stormed the battlefield, their weapons cutting down anything that moved. Tanks, gunships, orbital strikes. Humanity was not just here to retaliate, they were here to erase. One of the Justicars stood, his composure cracking. "Deploy all forces immediately. We must contain this before—" Another alert. The screen switched yet again. The human homeworld had received the news. And the fleets coming for vengeance? They were just the beginning. The Galor War Council had never convened with such urgency before. Across the great holographic war map, their fleets blinked in and out of existence, distress signals flaring up like wildfire. Reports flooded in. Battle groups obliterated. Planetary defences breached. Entire strongholds reduced to little more than glass and rubble. The humans were advancing far faster than any projection had accounted for. "They're ignoring surrender transmissions," one warlord rasped, his armoured carapace flexing in agitation. "They aren't taking prisoners," another turned his eye stalks toward the intelligence officer, demanding an explanation. "Why would they?" the officer said bitterly. "The colony was wiped out. No survivors." The warlord clicked his mandibles. Standard galactic procedure allows for strategic retaliation, but this is eradication. The Supreme Commander of the War Council, a being older than the last 3 galactic cycles combined, stared at the footage. The humans were moving with terrifying efficiency, overwhelming planetary defences in mere hours, executing precise orbital strikes to sever communication nodes, cutting supply lines with surgical precision. There were no drawn-out battles, no prolonged sieges. They struck, they destroyed, and they moved on. "This is not an army," the Supreme Commander said finally. "This is retribution." Someone brought up a tactical analysis of their new priority target, Captain Elias Ward. The officer shook his head. "He's no longer operating alone. We thought he was a rogue agent, but we were wrong. The humans have mobilized." Another council member spoke up. "We have far superior numbers. This war should be unwinnable for them." The intelligence officer made a strangled noise. "That's the problem. The humans are not fighting a war. They aren't taking territory. They aren't negotiating. They're exterminating." The warlords of the council shifted uncomfortably. This was not the way of interstellar war. This was something different, something ancient, something terrifying. Then the alarms blared. A priority distress call lit up the chamber. The defence fleet orbiting Zor Prime had been breached. There had been no Grand Fleet engagement, no warning. The human assault ships had arrived in a wave of high-speed orbital insertions, breaking through the blockade with brute force and precise, coordinated violence. "Deploy all planetary defences," the Supreme Commander roared. The war map flickered, highlighting surface defences activating across the homeworld. Thousands of automated turrets, kinetic barriers, energy shields, all coming online at once. The ground defences were impressive, but it wouldn't be enough. On the screen, hundreds of human landing craft descended through the atmosphere, weaving through anti-air fire, like predators dodging feeble strikes from wounded prey. Dropships broke formation at the last moment, scattering to avoid concentrated defences, landing at strategic points across the capital. The War Council watched in horror as the first wave of soldiers emerged. They weren't standard troops, they were veterans. Black Ops units, shock troopers, special forces, the kind of soldiers deployed for absolute, unrelenting destruction. And at the head of them all, Elias Ward. The humans didn't even hesitate. They tore through defensive positions like they were an afterthought. Barricades meant to hold back armies were reduced to burning wreckage in seconds. The city's towering spires, once symbols of the Xenia's galactic dominance, were now being demolished by precise explosives and overwhelming firepower. One of the warlords collapsed into his seat. "They're not stopping." No one spoke. The War Council's chamber trembled as something massive impacted the surface. Then another, and another. The warlords looked at the tactical feed, their panic growing. It wasn't just soldiers. The humans had brought planetary bombardment weapons. The War Council watched, paralysed, as the unthinkable unfolded. The human fleet hadn't come to conquer. They had come to erase. The War Council's chamber was in chaos. Shouting, hissing, clicking mandibles. Every Zor present had abandoned their usual composure. The capital trembled as the first planetary bombardment struck. Not random devastation. Number. This was far worse. The humans were dismantling the planet with precision, taking out command centers, energy relays, and defensive emplacements with ruthless efficiency. The Supreme Commander slammed a claw against the holotable. "Deploy all remaining forces. If we do not push them back now, we will lose the capital before the day is out." A subordinate stammered. "The humans. There are too many." More ships arrived through the hyperlane. They were supposed to be days away, but... The map shifted, revealing the reinforcements. Dozens of human warships, bristling with weaponry, had entered orbit. One of the warlords slumped. "They don't have a command structure anymore, no chain of diplomacy. They are acting as a single, furious entity." The Supreme Commander's voice was deadly. "How many?" The intelligence officer hesitated. "Every human warship capable of combat." The silence was deafening. A species had never mobilized its entire military force before. Not for a colony. Not even for their own homeworlds. There were always strategic retreats, calculated responses. Even at the height of the galactic wars, no civilization had been reckless enough to commit everything to a single cause. The humans had done exactly that. An incoming transmission interrupted the Council's rising panic. The screen flickered, revealing the inside of a ruined Zor command post. Elias Ward stood among the wreckage, his rifle slung across his chest, his face covered in battle dust and streaks of alien blood. Behind him, human soldiers moved with mechanical efficiency, securing prisoners. Number not prisoners. They were dragging Zor officers to the centre of the room, binding them in containment cuffs. Ward stared into the transmission feed. "You've run out of time." The Council remained frozen. No one spoke. No one even breathed. Ward tilted his head slightly. "Nothing to say." The Supreme Commander's mandibles twitched. "You think this is victory? We are the ruling species of this galaxy. We control the hyperlanes, the trade networks, Ward cut him off. "Not anymore." The holomap flickered again, showing real-time footage from across the Zor Empire. Every major planet, every shipyard, every industrial hub, every major space station. The humans had attacked them all. The Supreme Commander recoiled. "Impossible. Your species does not have the numbers for this level of..." "We don't need numbers," Ward said. "We have cause." The warlords looked at one another, their desperation growing. "You can't wipe us out," one of them hissed. "We surrender." Ward's expression didn't change. Surrender was an option before K-47. Before you executed every last civilian, every last family, every last child. One of the warlords lashed out, slamming his clawed fist onto the table. The Galactic Accord does not permit war crimes, and you are committing the worst of them all. Ward leaned forward slightly. You think this is war? His voice was low, steady. This is what happens when you break something that can't be fixed. The transmission cut out. The War Council was left staring at the empty screen, the echoes of their own failure ringing in their minds. Then the capital's outer defences collapsed. The Supreme Commander felt the vibrations in his very core. The fortress walls were shaking. The reinforced structures of the capital, once thought invincible, were failing, one by one. Reports from across the planet were grim. Defensive sectors lost. Entire battalions wiped out. No reinforcements responding. The skies above Zor Prime were no longer filled with its mighty defence fleet. Only human warships remained, their cannons methodically silencing any last-ditch resistance. The capital's streets had become battlefields. Zor warriors fought with desperate precision, but their weapons barely slowed the human advance. Tactical plasma strikes rained down, cutting apart entire formations before they could regroup. Heavy armoured shock troops moved with precision, covering every alley, every corridor, eliminating the last remnants of organised defence. The War Council chambers' doors groaned as something massive struck them. Then again. A third impact sent cracks splintering through the reinforced alloy. The warlords braced themselves, some drawing ceremonial weapons, more for tradition than actual use. Others slumped in their seats, defeated. The Supreme Commander did not move. He simply watched the doors, waiting for the inevitable. With one final shattering blow, the chamber doors exploded inward. A wave of dust and smoke rolled through as human soldiers stormed inside, their weapons raised, but controlled. They fanned out, covering every possible escape route. And then Elias Ward walked in. His combat armour was scorched and battered, his movement slow but purposeful. His weapon was lowered, but no one in the room mistook it for mercy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the Supreme Commander straightened. His eye stalks twitched, his mandibles clicking as he studied the human before him. "We were wrong about your kind," he admitted. Ward stared at him. "Yes. We believed humanity could be reasoned with." Ward stepped forward, his boots echoing in the ruined chamber. "You mistook patience for weakness." One of the warlords, trembling, rasped, This war should not have gone this far. There were laws, rules." Ward turned his gaze on the warlord. "You made rules to protect yourselves," he said evenly, "not to prevent what you did." The warlord recoiled. Ward didn't let him finish. "The Accord exists to prevent unnecessary suffering. You didn't just break it, you mocked it. You signed it, then slaughtered a colony of people who had no way to fight back. You wanted us to trust the law would bring justice while you walked away, untouched." The Supreme Commander exhaled slowly. "And now?" Ward glanced at the human soldiers standing by. They were waiting for orders. The Supreme Commander realized, "You've won. What happens next?" Ward's grip on his rifle tightened. "That depends." The warlord stiffened. "On what?" Ward's expression didn't change. "On whether your species is smart enough to learn from this." The chamber was silent. Ward let the words hang in the air before speaking again. "You built an empire on the belief that no one would ever dare do to you what you've done to others. You thought your rules, your alliances, your traditions would protect you from consequences. But you forgot the one thing every human understands." The Supreme Commander tilted his head. "And what is that?" Ward took a slow breath. "There is no law, no accord, no system in the universe that can stop a man who has nothing left to lose." The War Council said nothing, because they knew, they understood. The war was over. The Zor would never wage another.